Married to a tennis champion who's stuck on a losing streak, Tashi Duncan, played by Zendaya, is a former prodigy in the sport herself, who now serves as his coach and books him into the low-level challenger contest to hopefully get his spirits back for the game. However, the tournament brings him up against a former best friend, and tensions run high as the pair battle it out on the court. Luca Guadagnino's film, drawn from a screenplay by Justin Kuritzkes, is less about the sport that it's set within and more about the relationships of the three leads. The film starts with the ex-friends and now rivals Patrick and Art, played by Josh O'Connor and Mike Feist, facing each other on the court, and it's immediately obvious that there are some tensions running high between the pair, with our suspicions being that it's something to do with Zendaya's Tashi. The film then hops us back in time to slowly fill in the gaps, briefly returning to the present-day tournament after each segment as we see the pair's relationship change over time. And indeed, it's being reflected in the tennis being played itself. This paces beautifully and builds to an enthralling, enticing, and deeply sensual closing act that had me on the edge of my seat and holding my breath, not in anticipation of who wins the tennis match, but in seeing a rivalry between old friends play out. Guadagnino has said in interviews that he finds tennis quite boring, and I feel very much the same. I've never cared for the sport, so initially, hearing that this was a love story set around the world of tennis, I wasn't that enthralled. However, Guadagnino's name kept me interested, but still, I went in with at best moderate expectations. 2 hours and 10 minutes later, when asked what I thought of the film as a colleague passed me in the corridor as I left, I could only simply manage to say something expletive followed by brilliant. It absolutely floored me with the intensity of the emotional drive, the impact of the visuals, and the dynamics of the storytelling. In not caring about tennis, Guadagnino has delivered one of the best, if not the best, tennis dramas to date. And the court scenes themselves are shot with a style and intensity that has you dripping with sweat simply watching them. From shots presented from under the court to a point of view of the ball itself, no trick is missed in making this feel and look something different. But tennis is only being used as a metaphor here, and indeed an early line in the film describes the sport as a relationship, and that's exactly what we see play out as the two rivals battle for not the title, but for the attentions of Tashi. Tashi herself appears to be playing her own game of emotional tennis throughout the film, hitting her attentions back and forth between the pair, and all three leads inhabit their roles with a sensual grace. And whilst the film built up a reputation for being seductive and sexy on the run-up to release, it's worth noting that the tennis matches themselves had more sensual and seductive thrust to them than the off-court moments did. Challengers never drops the ball for the whole runtime, and it's certainly a contender for my personal top film of the year. When I first saw the basic synopsis for this, Liam Neeson is an assassin who plans to retire, but a personal conflict draws him into a dangerous game of cat and mouse. It seemed like it was yet another repetitive play on the same role we've seen him play ever since Taken came out. With low expectations and watching only through a bizarre compulsion I have to check out every Liam Neeson film, what I found was a film that, whilst it does cover familiar ground, the manner in which it covers it makes it feel something stronger and fresher. Set against the backdrop of the 70s troubles in Northern Ireland, the film opens with a car bombing in Belfast, giving us a quick introduction to Kerry Condon as Dorian McCann, who heads up this small faction of terrorists. Fleeing Belfast, the four take shelter in a coastal town in Donegal, where Neeson's Finbar resides, trying to live a quiet life covering up his own line of work as a hitman for hire. We see Finbar take on what he plans to be his last job, cold and emotionless when delivering his message of violent retribution, before he tells his boss, played by Cole Meany, that he is packing it all in. However, one of the group of terrorists in hiding comes to the attention of Finbar when he discovers that he's been beating the daughter of the local pub keeper, setting off a chain of events that escalate and threaten the whole of this small community, and also threaten at the same time to open Finbar's secrets up to the friends he has made for himself. On paper, it all sounds very generic, but the presentation and delivery are what make this stand out from other Neeson thrillers. With much more somber tone and delivery, this has an almost Western feel to it, with easy comparisons being made to films such as Unforgiven, which tackle similar themes of regret and redemption for a life spent killing. Indeed, much like Unforgiven, we have an overly enthusiastic kid who wants to follow in the footsteps of the legendary killer, here played by Jack Gleeson as Kevin, despite being told to find himself a better life. Kieran Hines, Sarah Green, Neve Cusack all add local charm to the mix, with Hines in particular offering insight into the simple day-to-day relationships that Neeson's stone-faced killer has built over the years. But in the end, it is Neeson and Condon who propel this film from start to finish, and do so marvellously. Neeson may be riffing on old tropes he's demonstrated previously, but here it is a much more reflective approach, and more grounded, less celebratory. When the violence breaks out, it isn't done for thrills, but to slowly chisel away the last hopes of redemption that Finbar has, and Neeson shows this in every glance. Condon is full of fire and emotion, with her own regrets, the killing of children in the recent bombing, but tries to cover this all up under anger and venom towards a country that has fallen around her. Her character seeks redemption through death, feeling nothing can atone for her sins, and so she presents a very different approach than Finbar to the escalating violence of the small town. In the Land of Saints and Sinners won't blow any doors off, but it's certainly one of the better of Neeson's more recent years' output, thanks to strong casting picks in key roles, and is certainly worth a watch.